Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's Carol Baskin, and you are listening to Fascination Street.
Yeah. AV in your ears. That's Ambush Vin giving you this audio visual down the most interesting street in the world. With my voice, Steve. Fascination Street. You already know. Let's get it. When you whip in the Fascination Street, what do you...
Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Teresa Strasser. Teresa is an Emmy winner and a former radio personality with the Adam Carolla Show, and then she was with him for the first few years of the Adam Carolla Show podcast. She since moved on to TV shows all over the place, winning Emmys, doing all the things, writing books, and this book that she is here to talk about is called Making It Home, Life Lessons from a Season of Little League. Listeners of the show know that I don't give two shits about baseball, and I care even less about little kid baseball. But that's not really what this book is about. This book is about Teresa and her father rebuilding their relationship and coping with the grief of Teresa losing her brother and her father losing, obviously, his son. And then 4 months later, Teresa loses her mother. So that's a lot of grief compacted into a small place. And this book tells the story of her father and her rebuilding their relationship and coping with this grief while watching Little League. Teresa's son is playing Little League baseball, and this is a touching story about her and her father going to every single game, watching every single game, getting super into the baseball part of it and hanging their hopes on this inning or that at bat. But through it all, Teresa and her father are able to talk about, deal with their past relationship issues and the loss of her brother and her mother. The book is called Making It Home, Life Lessons from a Season of Little League. I have been a huge fan of Teresa Strasser for quite some time. She's a dream guest. She is a bucket list guest. And special thanks to Vinnie Tortorich. Thanks, buddy, for helping make this happen. It's been a long time coming. I've wanted to have Teresa on the show for a while. And this is my conversation with podcaster, Emmy winner, and author of the new book, Making It Home, Life Lessons from a Season of Little League, Teresa Strasser.
Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Teresa Strasser. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It is 100% my pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, a long time ago, I was listening to a podcast called The Dawn and Drew Show. God, this was so long ago. Podcasting was almost brand new. And I was listening to that show on a Friday. And the guy, Drew, he said, hey, everybody, guess what? The Adam Carolla Show, today was his last show on terrestrial radio. And then Monday, he's going to start his very own podcast. So everybody go check it out. Now, where I am in San Antonio, the Adam Carolla Show was not syndicated locally. So when I heard that, I was like, holy moly, that's fantastic. I'm just getting into podcasting. I'm going to check that out. So I was with Adam Carolla from day one when it turned into a podcast. However, my guest today, Teresa Strasser, has been with Adam Carolla or was with Adam Carolla long before that and then into the podcast. We are going to get to all that. But first, Teresa, what I like to do is I like to start from the beginning. It helps us understand how the guests got from where they were to where they are. So where were you born and raised? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in San Francisco, California. Most people, when they say they're from San Francisco, they're from a suburb, but I'm actually from inside of the city in a neighborhood called Noe Valley.
Millie Valley?
Noe, N-O-E.
Noe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what did you want to be when you grew up? I know that your dad was a mechanic. Your mom, I think she was a therapist. I'm not sure what your mom did. I know she went to school, but I don't remember what for.
So in typical hippie mom, San Francisco fashion, my mom actually ran a coffee shop in the Haight-Ashbury district, and it was called Sacred Grounds. It's still there on Hayes and Cole.
That's right.
Whenever I go home to San Francisco, I always go see it. So yeah, she did that. And then she also had just kind of a basic, boring government job, which like a lot of people in my family do. Knew I did not want to work in my dad's shop, although I really loved it there, Delta Battery. And when I learned how to drive, I delivered batteries for him. So I worked there for a little while. I think when I was really young, I wanted to be a ballerina, but then it became obvious that I did not have an aptitude for that. I always loved writing. And I remember my mom took me to see the musical Annie, and there was just a bunch of little girls my age on stage. And I just remember thinking, like, those are the luckiest little girls in this whole world. Like, how did they get up there on that stage? Like, how do you get to do that? Well, I can't really sing, and I wasn't really a great dancer. So somehow, after maybe a year living in LA as an adult, I realized that there was a job called hosting. And it was sort of like writing out loud, like you're speaking extemporaneously, either on the radio or on camera. And I realized that that was maybe a lane for me.
Okay, so then how'd that play out?
Well, here's a funny story of how I ended up on the Adam Carolla Show. He had a co-host and news girl. That show was brand new. So Howard Stern went off the air. And then, the beginning of January, Adam was on all the West Coast markets. I think David Lee Roth was on the East Coast markets, and there was somebody in the Midwest named Rover. So they divided all of Howard Stern's terrestrial radio territories amongst 3 different broadcasters. And I remember I was a huge Howard Stern fan. So my radio was still set to that station in LA. And then all of a sudden it was Adam and a couple other people in studio and a female voice doing the news and being a co-host like a Robin Quivers. And I remember thinking, like, she's the luckiest person. Like, how do you get that job? How do you become the Robin of a radio show? Like, I remember thinking that. And I started listening to the show. I didn't really know Adam Carolla's work. I wasn't a Loveline person, but I remember like, oh, I like the vibe of this. And then that girl took 2 weeks off to do a television pilot. And they were having news girls come in 2 days at a time just to kind of fill the chair. And my agent called and said, would you want to do this job for day? They were calling my agency for somebody, a different girl, but she wasn't available. So she's like, yeah, do you want to do this for 2 days? And I did. And then they asked me back for 2 more days and then 2 more days. And then after 9 days, I was offered the job and the previous person never came back.
Did their pilot get picked up?
I don't think so. I remember it was directed by Ron Howard.
Oh, friend of the show, Ron Howard.
Yes, but I do not think it was picked up.
Hilarious. You stayed there for a really, really long time, which is super hard to believe because you're so young.
Thanks. Yeah, I was there until, as you mentioned, until the show went off the air. And then the very next day, we were doing a podcast from Adam's home office. I just remember being there with his dog, Molly, and Bald Brian, who was another cast member. And so it went.
So as far as people from the Adam Carolla Show, I think I've had on somewhere around 20 people from the show, including Adam. But you are, what's the word I'm looking for? You're a bucket list guest.
Oh my God. I'm such a bad get. Let me just, cards on the table. I feel like I've done so many podcasts to promote my book, which came out this year, Making It Home. And I tell this to my kids, feelings aren't facts. You can feel that you're not good at something, but that doesn't make it true. But I really feel much more comfortable interviewing people and asking them the questions. I don't know if I'm that great a get. So, maybe you'll regret this and, when it's all over. Just edit out the boring parts.
Oh, okay, sure. So it's just going to be a conversation with you talking all by yourself. I also had on Gina, and you guys had a podcast for a while that fairly recently ended.
Yeah, I wish we were still doing it, but I think both of us realized that we are not entrepreneurs. We loved actually recording it, but as you know, there's I wasn't prepared to be invoicing people and editing and uploading and booking, and
it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And, I guess I could have continued doing it myself, maybe I should have. At the time, I was also doing a TV job on the show called The List, which I did for almost 12 years and it just got canceled. So I think if I'd known like, oh, well, you'll be totally unemployed and you'll have nothing but time, you can learn how to invoice and edit. I would have, tried to convince Gina to keep doing it because we did have, not a huge audience, but it was significant. And I think it was a fun show.
It was a fun show. I enjoyed it immensely. The show started off with you guys just kind of recommending podcasts that you were listening to or that you had heard about. And then it sort of morphed into kind of a check-in with how you guys were doing and what was up with you. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. What was it called? Because it's still out there and everybody can go check it out. What's it called?
Easy Listening. So the original pitch, which we pitched to Podcast One, was Pod Soup, where we'd round up all the top podcasts of the week and play clips just like Talk Soup. But then, I don't know, there was some other podcast called Pod Soup. And even though they weren't in production, they didn't want us to use the name. So we changed the name. And then we realized that we were making our lives so difficult because there was so much pre-production. You'd have to, pull the time code of that clip that you wanted to do. But that's what I envisioned. I envisioned us presenting, 5 podcasts, either ones that everyone was talking about that were newsworthy or ones that were so random. Like there's a podcast about everything because there's like 700,000 podcasts. Like if you run a funeral home and you want to listen to a podcast about that, you can find it. But there's no topic too obscure to have 10 podcasts covering it.
There's like 11 podcasts about window cleaning.
For sure.
It's pretty insane. As a matter of fact, Fascination Street, I was the first one, but I think now there's either 3 or 4 called Fascination Street podcasts. And the way I found out about the first one was somebody had left a review and they were talking about the host, plural, and they named them. And I was like, who are these people they're talking about? Like they left a review for me instead of the other people. But the other podcast, the one they were trying to leave a review for, it was like a minister out of Ireland and I don't know, his 9-year-old sidekick. It was very, it was very not this show. And then I did a little digging and there's like, oh, and then another time I just wanted to see if my show was available on Alexa. And so I said, hey, Alexa, play Fascination Street podcast. And she started playing yet a different Fascination Street podcast, which is like this musician guy out of New York or whatever. And I was just like, what the hell is going on here? So I feel your pain. Did Podcast One pick it up?
No, that was a very bizarre experience that Gina and I have never really understood. We went up the chain and we met with Norm, who was like CEO then. I believe he's since passed away, so may he rest in peace. He came in just like a whirlwind. He's like, I've already heard this. My colleague told me, I already love it. We're doing this. I love this idea. If you don't do this, somebody else will. Pod Soup. It's great. I love it. Let's do it. And I said, thank you. And then I alerted my agent and I said, Podcast One wants to do a deal. And for some reason, she couldn't get people on the phone. I don't know what was happening and I'll never know, but it was intended to be on Podcast One. And, they do everything for you, right? Like they're going to have people to help with the billing and the production. I don't know. They sort of ghosted us and I'll never know why. So we decided to do our own thing like a lot of people do and just use a hosting service called Libsyn. But at that point, we were ill-equipped and both of us had full-time jobs. So I don't think we had the bandwidth or the time. Now I do.
Plus, both of you are raising kids. That's no joke.
Yeah, but there's plenty of moms who podcast. At this point, a couple years later, there are a bunch of services and producers that you can pay. And I think there are a lot of people in the Carolla-verse. Like, I don't know, is it Gary? I don't know. There's folks because I've done Lynette Carolla's podcast with Stephanie Wilder Taylor. I did that to promote my book. And they don't do any of that stuff. They have people, they go to a studio at someone's house and they have people to upload it and make clips and post and promote and all of those things that were really overwhelming. Me trying to learn TikTok. I mean, I even got a book called TikTok for Dummies. And I know that my kids who are 11 and 14, can intuitively make a video with a green screen and add music and subtitles. But that's going to take me all day. It's going to break my brain.
Yeah, I'm not good at any of that. I'm too old for that, I guess. That technology has sailed right past me, and I guess I'm okay with it. There are other people who would do things, but like you said, that's a check I got to cut, and I just don't know how I feel about that. Plus, I guess I'm kind of controlling because I can't imagine letting somebody else edit my show because I edit the shit out of this. And I don't know. I just don't know if I could hand the reins over to somebody. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about you. You have an Emmy. Where is it?
Oh, do you want me to go get it?
No, I just want to know where it is. I love asking people where they keep their hardware because, like Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, he keeps his Grammys in the guest bathroom so that when his guests are using the bathroom, they remember how cool he is. And so I always like to ask people where they keep their hardware. Where's your Emmy?
Okay, well, I actually have one daytime Emmy, and I think I have 2 or 3 local Emmys. They're like half the size, but I think they still kind of count.
Hey, I don't have any.
Well, I mean, the less relevant my career has gotten, the more prominent a position my Emmy needs to hold.
You're unemployed right now, so they're on the front door.
Yeah, and I have the other one welded to the front of my car. So when I drive my kids to practice, I used to be somebody.
Oh, stop it. So they're just kind of hiding out in various locations of your house right now?
They're here in the guest room where I have my little recording studio, which is the closet.
Sure.
But, I've really been thinking lately that I need to re-engineer my Zoom situation to put my Emmys in the background. Because like I said, the farther in the rear view the relevance of my career feels, the more I feel the need to remind people that I was once relevant.
Stop it. You're still relevant. You should have your Emmys and both of your books behind you. Your first book was called Exploiting My Baby Because My Baby's Exploiting Me. Did I get that right?
That's right.
I feel like this was back when you were on the Carolla Show podcast, and you, every once in a while, you would read excerpts of this book that you were in the process of writing. I think that's how I'm remembering it. Either that or you waited till it was all done, but you would read little excerpts here and there, and it was really, really sweet. What made you decide to write that book?
Thank you so much. Well, I started a blog, actually. So I got pregnant when the Carolla Show was still on the air, and then we got canceled, and I was like 3 months pregnant, but they had to pay out my whole contract. So I was like, wow, I'm getting paid to do nothing. I'm a mechanic's daughter, so the idea of getting paid to do nothing is still hard for me to wrap my head around. So I was like, I've got to make use of this time. Like, I'll write about the experience of being pregnant in a funny and edgy way. So I started a blog and I didn't know what to call it. And I remember saying to my friend, Ted, I don't want people to think I'm exploiting my baby. And he goes, well, just call it that. Like the way out is the way in, and you just look the boogeyman in the eye. So I guess, that URL was available. So I started a blog called Exploiting My Baby. And I just wrote, funny daily little blogs about being pregnant for the first time. And someone, a Carolla fan that was a literary agent, saw it. And he said, this should be a book. You already have a book. You've already written all these blogs. So the book was a collection of those essays. And it was a great experience. It was optioned by ABC. I wrote a pilot based on it called Mother Teresa. But ABC didn't ever produce it because that year they ended up producing a comedy about a veterinarian's office. And I don't know if the animals talk. In my memory, the animals talked. There was definitely some kind of a primate. But yeah, so Mother Teresa wasn't picked up, but I had the most incredible experience writing it. I just loved it. So that's how that one came to be. And then my most recent book, Making It Home, about 2 years after my brother died, I started to realize that my dad and I were turning Little League Baseball into our own grief group, that this was how we were working through our grief. And I just had a file where I'd write about it on my computer called Little League Grief Group. And I just kept adding to it. And then I pitched it to my agent, and Penguin, the publisher, was interested. But my editor there said, I don't want a book of essays. I want a narrative. I want it to read like narrative fiction with a through line and character arcs. And then I had nightmares for weeks. Like, do I know how to do that? But I did that. And that's what became this most recent book.
This most recent book, like she said, everybody, it's called Making It Home. And then, of course, because we're in the 2020s, there's more words in the title. So it's Making It Home, Life Lessons from a Season of Little League. I can't stand, not in your book, but just the fact that now all books have to be like an entire sentence long. I don't understand it at all. It's so weird. How did that happen? Did they say, hey, Making It Home is cool, but give me some more words? Like, how did that happen with the life lessons from a season of Little League?
Well, I had a different subtitle when I sold the book, but then there was a standoff where the publisher didn't like my subtitle. And I probably pitched over the course of weeks. This was just keeping me up at night. I probably pitched 100 other subtitles, but the publisher really was in love with Life Lessons from a Season of Little League. And it just wasn't like I was going to die on that hill. So I gave up. Now, the cover art, I wish I had it here.
I do. I got it. It's right here.
I think the cover art is beautiful. I fought
think
for
it's
that.
Absolutely gorgeous.
It is not their original design, had like a 1950s looking kid, and it was really depressing, and it makes you think the kid died, and I hated it. It was awful. I hated the font. I hated everything. To their credit, they were open to it, and we ended up with a cover that's beautiful. So I had to give up on the subtitle. But the subtitle that I wrote was Making It Home, a Season of Little League and Big Grief.
Ooh.
And they said, we don't want grief on the cover. And I was like, but grief's having a moment.
But also, the book is basically about coping with grief, which, I mean,
right.
It's basically a self-help book that has a wonderful story. Now, you did send me the book, and I appreciate that, but I did not read it. I listened to you read it to me, so I bought the audiobook.
Oh, thank you.
It was 100% my pleasure. I have a few questions about the book, as you could imagine.
Yeah.
One, some of these chapters, just listening to it, my eyes are welling up and I'm getting all frog in my throat or whatever. How were you able to read this without just a complete breakdown?
I had the most incredible director. I don't know if you heard it, but when I was on the Adam Carolla Show promoting the book, Orny Adams was there, the comedian, and he was busting my balls. Like, what does an audiobook director do? Tell you to pause at the semicolon? But actually, my director is this guy, Scott Sherritt, and I fangirled him so hard. All I wanted was for Scott Sherritt to direct my audiobook because I knew it was going to be a difficult book because it's also funny. It's funny and griefy, and the tone shifts really quickly.
Very quickly.
I'm not Gina Grad. Like, I'm not a voice actress. I don't do characters. There's a lot of characters in this book. There's a bunch of kids on the Little League team. There's a bunch of coaches. There's villains like Coach Glory Days and Coach Bunt. There's my dad, who's an old man. There's my husband. You know, there's both my kids, and one of them's 6 during the book. So I knew it was going to be a challenge, and I had started following him because he did Questlove's book. He did Prince Harry's book. He's worked with Oprah, Reese Witherspoon. He spent a month in the south of France working on Bono's book. And I just thought, like, if I can get Scott Sherritt to do my book. So my publisher booked me the dates, and they said, we're just going to hire the director that did your last book. And I said, not a problem. She was great. But is there any way we could just ask if Scott Sherritt's available? And then the next day or a day or two later, they said, yeah, we sent him the book and he wants to do it. So I had those 4 days with him. It is a much different experience than my first book. I mean, he's on Zoom. He's in the studio with you every second. What you're talking about, where I'm able to change tone quickly, is really like a victory of editing. Because what he would tell me to do is just like, let whatever feelings happen. You have a box of Kleenex. You blow your nose so your voice sounds normal again. You wait, 30, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, and then you just start again, and he's cutting out what's in between. So it makes it seem like I'm a lot better than I am.
So you did break down. It was just cut out?
Yeah, a few times. It's weird because even I was doing a podcast a few days ago, and I started crying. I've been talking about this book. My brother died 8 years ago, January, and I've been talking about this book since it came out in June. but there are still things that really get me. I joke that the stages of grief for my dad and I were the draft, the regular season, and the postseason. But I write about in my book that my dad would say, the stages of grief is total bullshit. There's only 2 stages. There's before and after. Baseball helps us with the after, and I feel like I'm living in the after. And in many ways, it's just as hard, and the grief feels just as intense, and time just doesn't heal all the wounds. It does get different. I think that's what I really wanted to write about, was that if you can tolerate it and walk through it, it's going to get different, and different is better.
The only way out is through.
That's right. Robert Frost.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Hey, Streetwalkers. On February 26th, we will release our 400th episode. I want to give each and every one of you a huge thank you for riding with me all the way to this giant mile marker. For the first time since the show started, I'm going to be taking a little break for the month of March. There will be no new episodes, but instead, I'll release an older episode every weekday of the month in a best of style, showcasing some of my wife's favorite conversations. Enjoy these 21 Fascination Street classics Monday through Friday, every weekday in the month of March, and I'll be back with all new episodes beginning April 1st. I couldn't do this without you, so tell a friend, and thanks again for being Streetwalkers.
Let's get back into it.
Okay, so this book, Making It Home, Life Lessons from a Season of Little League by Miss Teresa Strasser. You have a few quotes here on the back. One of them, it's one of my favorites. I'm just going to read it because I'm a monster. Well, Dr. Drew, love that guy.
Same.
2-time guest of the show. I love this book. It is certainly not about any specific stages of grief, nor is it prescriptions for, quote, getting over it. This is a story about learning to lose with patience and self-compassion in baseball and in life. And that's from Dr. Drew.
Isn't he the best?
Dr. Drew is a goddamn hero. Oh, Mike Rowe, delightful, excellent, beautiful. You're going to love this book. And my favorite quote is, this book is complicated, touchy, and at times hilarious. Everybody go buy this book. And that's from Steve Owens from Fascination Street podcast. Guys, I'm not kidding. This book is amazing. This book follows Teresa basically rebuilding a relationship with her father, who have a complicated relationship like most parents and children do. Hers is a little unique. There's a crazy bunch of shit in there that makes it a much more complicated relationship than one might think. But this book follows their journey on building their relationship back and trying to come to grips with the loss of Teresa's brother. And what was it, like 4 months later, your mother?
Yeah, she died exactly 4 months to the day. My brother died January 20th, and then she died May 20th. And she hadn't even been sick. I think she just, body, mind connection. And I think losing her child was just too much for her. And she just went downhill fast. And it was just surreal because I always thought, like, when our parents die, my brother and I will have each other. This is like kind of a strange thing to say, but my brother was an estate attorney, and I never worried about like legal stuff because I thought, like, well, how many people's brothers are estate lawyers? Like, my brother's going to handle all this. And instead it was like, oh my God, it was so confusing. I mean, my parents didn't have very much, but I didn't have like people's bank passwords, and anyone who's lost somebody will know what I mean. Like, there'd be like some bank account with $300 in it, but I couldn't get access to it. And I'd be like at the bank, and my mom's just died. I'm in Vegas and I'm crying, and like, trust me, that's my mom, like.
I promise.
Yeah, I had to do all this. I also had to clean out her condo by myself.
Which you do talk about a little bit in the book.
Yeah. Again, anyone who's lost somebody knows that you're going to have this existential crisis when you're cleaning out their shit. Like, am I disrespecting my mom if I don't keep all 14 of her blue glass vases. You know, she had like so much. I mean, she wasn't a hoarder, but she loved a flea market. And she had all kinds of like chalkware art in her kitchen, like oranges and cherries with smiling faces. And they were just really creepy. And I just had too much grief. They call it cumulative grief because I lost my brother and my mom. And I just wasn't in a mental state to differentiate between like, which of these smiling oranges should I keep? So I just paid the realtor's cousin who had a truck to take everything and like donate it. And whatever the Salvation Army didn't want, he just took down to the Clark County dump. And that was that. I feel bad. Sometimes I still wish I had kept more of her stuff, but it's just stuff.
What did you keep?
I kept a jade pendant of hers that she thought jade was good luck.
Is it next to your Emmys? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
You mean I've welded it to the front of my car so that everybody can know I'm a winner. I swear to fucking God, I used to be a winner. So yeah, I kept that. And I don't know, she had like a stupid framed portrait of a hula girl for some reason. I kept that. A little statue she had, a little box that she kept some jewelry in, pictures, not very much. I had the fuckets real bad that day. And I just thought, none of this stuff, you can't take it with you. This is just stuff. My memories of my mom, you know, and we had a complicated relationship too, because as I write about in the book, my parents got divorced when I was 3 and my brother was 5, and they separated us. So my brother went with my dad and I went with my mom. And my mom just really wasn't cut out for motherhood. She was a great person. She had a lot of friends. I mean, obviously she was cool. She had a coffee shop called Sacred Grounds. She was beautiful. You know, she would like go folk dancing in her boots and her Capezio leotard.
I'm sorry, folk dancing does not know that now she's not cool anymore. Like
it should become cool again. It should become cool again. I mean, a lot of 70s stuff is cool again, but she was truly a free spirit, like in every sense of the word. Like she didn't care about social conventions. And as a result, there's still a lot of things like I learned manners from movies and TV. So I still am kind of just faking it. If I'm ever at any kind of fancy situation, I learned all that, like forks, knives, napkin in your lap. I just learned that from TV.
I learned all that stuff from my 3rd wife.
You've had 3 wives?
Yeah.
Are you still on the 3rd one?
I am. We're going to celebrate 22 years this year.
Congrats.
She is amazing. My mom actually picked her out for me. I was working in restaurants and I was going through my 2nd divorce, and my mom said, "Hey, you make really terrible decisions when it comes to women." And I was like, "Thanks." And then she said, "You should date somebody like my friend." And I was like, "Well, let me introduce me to your friend then." Now we've been married 22 years and my mom's been gone for 10 of them.
Oh.
So I feel like, well, that was her parting gift, I guess. But it was, way before anyway.
That's a beautiful story. Don't just try to gloss over it. I'm fascinated on Fascination Street. What were you like in high school? Did you have girlfriends or what? What was going on?
I got married in high school.
What?
Ask my son. He was there. Wait a minute. Blah, blah, blah. That's my story. I'm a crazy fool. Now,
what were you doing in restaurants? Were you waiting tables? Were you bartending? Were you
Oh, hell no. I was behind the kitchen.
Huh?
I mean, I was back there. I worked in restaurants for, like 20 years or something like that. So much so that my son, he ended up going to culinary school. And, he's a chef. The restaurants was a big part of my life.
Been there, was waiting tables. I don't know if you remember the restaurant chain Hula Hands.
Of course.
I worked at the Hula Hands on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, summer job in college. And then when I graduated, I worked at a really fancy restaurant called the Corona Bar and Grill. It was basically like living the bear. I was not equipped to work there because I'd only worked at Hula Hands.
Living the bear.
I was living the bear behind.
Corner.
I was living the bear. And yeah, it was a super fancy restaurant. And my grandfather doctored up my whole resume. So it was a complete fiction. And I got this job. And I remember I never progressed to a dinner shift even after a year because I was just a terrible waitress. And my first week, someone ordered a Beefeaters. And I was like, do you want that medium or well done?
What did they say?
They looked at me like, it's gin. Yes, of course it is.
Yeah,
I did
I'm just
not know.
saying, did you want a medium pour or?
Yeah, heavy pour, extra. I was testing you. You passed. I didn't know how to open a bottle of wine. I didn't know how to open champagne. You'd have to come out with the whole presentation. So I just pay the busboy to do that. But it was a good experience. Yeah, I never, ever, ever want to do that again. I still have nightmares. I still have waitressing nightmares because my brain just wasn't good at keeping track of where all my tables were. So like, okay, I dropped menus on table 4, table 2 has their drinks, table 3 needs dessert, separate checks. Are you kidding me? Wait, they want to split their salad? Like, it would break my brain. I still can wake up in a cold sweat. Like, a table was sat 15 minutes ago and I never dropped their menus.
Oh, sweet. You're going to have to write another book just to get over that.
Exactly.
Making it home, I'm still not your waitress.
Or I'm still the worst waitress.
Just a quick side. Am I thinking of someone else, or one time a long time ago, did somebody break into your house or apartment and or poop in your closet?
No, but what you might be thinking of is a story that came out on the Adam Carolla Show. Okay, I've seen this meme where like the meme is, you ever like think something is like not a big deal and then you say it at a table in front of all your friends and everyone's looking at you like, what? And you think, no, that's happened to everybody. Well, this story, I knew it was a little unusual, but I thought it was going to be good content. So I told it to Adam on the show, and then every single person that works there on the crew was just looking at me, and it was very uncomfortable. Like, I thought it was going to be a funny story, and it did not land right. And people, I think, thought there was something wrong with me, and it was upsetting. So I stopped telling that story, but that may be what you're thinking of. And it's probably going to have the same effect right now on your listeners. So I'll tell the most abbreviated version of it, which is that I was living in Hollywood and I was writing a singles column, working as a writer in television, living in my little studio apartment. And I got a phone call saying that a friend had anonymously ordered me a stripogram guy. And I really was like, oh, I know that's my friend Richard. That's totally something he would do. So the guy comes over and he says, I can't tell you who ordered it until I've completed the stripogram. So he comes over, he does his stripping, and then he hands me a receipt, and then he leaves. But when I look at the receipt, it says that it's from a company called Pleasures Unlimited. Like there's a spelling error. And I look more at the receipt, and this doesn't look right. It's like a fake fax. This is a long time ago, so it was like fax. I call my friend Richard, and I'm like, I can't believe you did that. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. So, a few hours later, I was at Hollywood Vice telling them the story, and that guy has never been captured.
Wait, you had somebody just knock on your door and strip for you and then leave?
No, he called first.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
But he just...
And then, he stripped, like he had a boom box and he had a whole act and he did a whole stripogram thing, but he wasn't actually a stripogram guy and no one had hired him or paid him to come over. I think he was just like a perv.
So...
he had done it to a lot of other women in my area. They had like 5 other cases.
What made you go to the police?
Well, I thought like this was fine because at the time I had this boyfriend named Steve Agee. He's like an actor, comedian.
He is. He's on everything.
He's on everything.
He's on everything.
I was dating him at the time, and if you haven't seen him, I don't know. He's like somewhere between 6'6" and 6'8".
Yeah, he's
a big guy.
6'100". He's huge.
He's huge. Yeah. And so he was like, no, this is stupid. I don't want you doing this. I'm like, well, if you're worried about the safety, then just be, he was outside because I had a studio. So he's like, he introduced himself and he's like, I'm outside. I've got a bat and pepper spray. And then I was inside with a bat and pepper spray. So it wasn't like I didn't think it was going to be unsafe. But what if his plan was to do something untoward? I wanted the police to know in case there had been other reports of it and to, just in case. And he had hit up a bunch of people and some of them were well known.
That is so weird. I can't believe that went over like a lead balloon with the Carolla folks.
Because I think they were uncomfortable that I had allowed the guy in, even though it had Steve was there and I had Peppers. Like they were creeped out. But I thought, like, I'm a writer. What would Ernest Hemingway do? Like, I've got to have adventures.
Yeah, no kidding. That's fantastic. I don't know how I confused that with whatever I said, which is a lot grosser than whatever happened there. Was the guy fit? Like, did he have a stripper body or?
No, that should have clued me in. Like, he wasn't a gargoyle or anything. He had long hair, kind of in a ponytail, sort of like a silky shirt. His act wasn't very good. He wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Like, he was definitely not ripped and didn't look like he worked out.
Did you ever see, I think it was the last season of Friends where they had a stripper?
No.
It was a last minute stripper, and the cop comes in and he does his thing, and then he's panting and he's out of breath because it's Danny fucking DeVito, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So maybe that's what it was. He was just trying to get a gig. Oh my gosh. Did you tip him at all?
No. He said that the anonymous person who ordered, he said that person pays him and tips him.
That is so weird. If it's all a scam, why not at least make a couple of bucks? That's weird. Well, I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, but I think he just wanted to, like, I can see if you have some kind of broken brain sexually thinking like, this is really exciting because you're.
What did Drew say?
I don't think he knows the story. He wasn't there when I told it.
That's
and I've stopped
fantastic.
telling it because, like I said, it went over like, it hit the ground like a safe, as they say.
Sweet. Back to San Francisco for a second. Mutual friend and previous guest, Mike Dawson. There's like a statue of either his uncle or his grandfather somewhere around Fisherman's Wharf. So you'll have to ask him about that the next time we talk to him. There's like a straight up statue of his grandfather or his uncle.
How do I not know that? I mean, Dawson and I have been friends
For 20 years. Like you guys have been friends for a long time.
We love each other. We started at the Carolla Show on the same day, and we met in the parking lot, both very nervous. I was just there for a tryout, and so was he.
He is so rad. If you were to call me on my cell phone and were I to not pick up, you would hear his voice on my outgoing message. Mike Dawson is the coolest guy.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors. Let's get back into it.
Okay, have you ever seen the movie? It's a documentary called The King of Kong.
Yes.
So you know that it's about people playing a damn video game?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things that made that movie so amazing and noteworthy is that nobody gives a flying shit about two assholes trying to beat each other at Donkey Kong. But somehow the storytellers, or the documentarians, if you will, were able to fashion that story in such a way that it made people give a shit. That said, I don't give a shit about baseball, much less little kid baseball, but your book and the way you craft these stories of baseball, little tiny kid baseball, had me on the edge of my seat. I took an extra lap around the neighborhood because I was trying to figure out if they were going to win this game or that game. I was there. So well done with your storytelling.
Thanks.
You are a magnificent writer. A long time ago, my podcast did sponsor a little league team. There's a little kid in the neighborhood. He's a friend. I don't know. He's probably 9 or 10 now, but this was a couple of years ago. We have the same birthday, which ironically is also the day your mother died. Sorry. That's not what I wanted for my birthday, I promise. I did not wish for that. But I guess where I was going with that is just I don't care about baseball. It's one of the most boring things I've ever seen in my life. But the way you tell these stories and the bonding that goes on during these games and just how into these games you and your dad get, it just blew me away. It kept me on the edge of my seat. One of the very first things you said in the book, and I quote, "Other than challah, our baked goods are for shit, but we've got mourning rituals down, MOURNING. What do you got against Jewish baked goods?"
My editor had the exact same problem. This was actually one of the few notes that I fought.
Did he say, "What do you have against bagels?" Because that was my question.
That's
What you
a
got
great
against bagels, lady? Those are baked
Bagels
goods.
are, a very, very important food group for me. They need to be boiled.
Boiled and then baked.
Yes, right. Then
Yeah, so
baked.
they're still baked goods.
But arugula and like some of the other baked goods of the Jews, it's just not our strong suit as a people. I feel like we're very good at grief. We're good at education, pretty good at family. But where we really, really have a weakness is our baked goods. They're terrible. My editor, Tracy Bernstein, who's so brilliant, and she probably gave me, over the course of writing this book, hundreds of notes. And every single one of them made the book better. I love a note. I'm not one of these writers that's defensive about notes. If somebody's giving me a note, there's a reason for it. But she was like, what do you mean with the baked goods? Like, I don't think that's factual. And we went back and forth. So yeah, I don't know. You have arugula, you're going to break a tooth. It's not a good cookie.
Well, we're talking about your book. It is called Making It Home, Life Lessons from a Season of Little League. Is your father still alive?
Yeah, he's 80 and we still go to baseball games. I see my dad for every game, every tournament. My older son, Nate, who's like the main subject in the book.
He's the MVP of the book for sure.
Yeah, he's 9. Still hasn't read the book because he doesn't love reading. Now he's 14.
Okay, so I was thinking about that. I don't know if he should read it. And here's why I say that. At the time, he was super engrossed into the game and the season and, being a better batter and pitcher and all the things. I don't know how he's going to feel when he finds out how much of the load he carried for you and your dad.
I know.
He didn't know it, but he had a huge burden. I mean, I guess it's not a...
If he didn't play well, our day was ruined.
Right.
Like the full 48 hours, we were miserable. But I think in a way, that was part of the grief group. That was part of the roller coaster. Like it was a safe thing to feel bad about, because my dad had lost a child. So losing a baseball game, you'd think you'd have perspective and you'd be like, this doesn't matter. No, we had none. You hear about these parents that are way too into their kids' soccer, basketball, football, chess, violin.
Nobody's that into chess. I'm sorry. You're going to have to take that out when you tell that story again. No.
I disagree.
Chess.
Did you see the movie with Joe Mantegna? Searching for Bobby Fischer.
Yeah, I remember that movie.
In that movie, Joe Mantegna is the dad. There's Ben Kingsley. Lawrence Fishburne is in that movie. So Joe Mantegna's kid is this chess genius. It's a prodigy. I love this movie and I think about it a lot. And I think there's analogies for sports parent or any parent. Maybe your kid is a violinist or, a wrestler or a writer, whatever it is. There's this incredible scene in the movie with Joe Mantegna and this little kid's teacher, who I think is played by Helen Hunt. And Helen Hunt is talking to the dad because she thinks he's taking it too far and it's just chess. And she's like, maybe he doesn't need to spend all his time on this chess thing. Maybe he should be with friends. And Joe Mantegna stops her in the classroom and he goes, this chess thing? My kid is better at this chess thing than you will ever be at anything in your life. And it's an incredible scene that I think any parent can relate to because there's something about your kid being talented and having a knack for something. And in your case, maybe it's this chef thing. But you're invested in it. Both my kids play sports. And when they're playing well or they're showing some kind of natural aptitude, part of you is like, I'm connected to that greatness and that excellence. Like I made that human being. That kid is mine. That kid on the mound struck out 9 batters. That's my baby. So I think all of us have to separate out where do you end and that kid start. And I think there's some of that in this book where my dad and I are so proud. We've imbued so much to this, not just Nate, but to the whole team, the purple pinstripes, that he was carrying at that a lot. And I'm glad he didn't know. And, I'm still pretty into it. And I wish I wasn't, but I do get really nervous when he's pitching. I get nervous when he's at bat.
So is he still play?
Yeah, he's a 6 foot tall lefty and he throws hard. So
he's 6 feet tall at 14 years old.
Yeah.
How tall is Daniel?
6'4".
How tall is your dad?
My dad's a small little Jew. He shrunk. He was 5'9". Now he's 5'8". So what's funny is my younger kid has more the Strasser family genetics. So his big brother's like a big, huge, little league legend. And Andrew, my baby, is in 5th grade, 70 pounds. It's tiny.
That is hilarious. I've always heard that the kid gets the height from the mom's dad, but I guess that's not the case. Wait, is he really your dad?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I asked you if your dad was still alive, mainly because some of the stories in this book don't paint him in the best light. Has he read this book?
Oh, yeah. He loves it. He loves the book because, look, my parents were hippies and what they valued was art. Art was the most important thing that you could do. Like it was the best thing that you could do with your life.
Except for rebuild an alternator.
Alternators, generators, and starters are not going to rebuild themselves. I went to NYU and I was in the Tisch School of the Arts, and then I studied journalism. For like the first 10 years of my career, people would always ask me like, oh, how did your parents feel when you said you wanted to be in TV or you wanted to be a writer? Oh, they must have been so worried. Like, no, they were upset when my brother said he wanted to be a lawyer.
Now that is hilarious coming from a Jewish family.
Yeah, it's true.
Because there's expectations that are put on Jewish families, children, I guess Jewish children, and creative arts is not any of those expectations.
In our family, it was like that was the highest thing you could do with your life. Of course, my dad's still a dad. So when he read the book, he had 2 questions. And the first was, I swear to God, he said, do they pay you to write this book? He just really wanted to know. Like,
what did you say?
I'm like, yeah, Dad, it's Penguin. Yeah, like they don't pay me a lot, but they pay me. And then he took a beat and he said, who's going to play me in the movie?
Nice. What'd you say? Who's going to play him?
Well, I do have a dream.
It's got to be somebody who's a little on the skinnier side, right? Your dad's a little bitty, skinny guy, or is he?
He's a scrawny guy that's 5'9".
Yeah, that's the picture I got.
And he's also like, he only rides his bike. He doesn't even have a car. And we live in Phoenix. Like it's pretty hot here in the summer. And my dad rolls up on his e-bike.
Love it. Does he still use that green sheet as a bike cover?
Oh, he sure does. Yep.
Okay, so my sister and I were separated as well when we were growing up. My parents got a divorce, and my sister and I were, I don't know, like 6 and 7 or something like that. She's older. As is typical, my mom got custody, but then she outsmarted the judge. So what she did was she moved into an adults only apartment complex. So she couldn't take us. Wham, wham. So then we went to go live with my dad. And at some point, maybe like a year or 2 into that, I don't know, maybe more, but it felt like a year or 2 into that, my mom sent my sister to summer camp or some shit like that. And then when my mom picked her back up from summer camp, she just didn't bring her home. So my sister just moved in with my mom, and then I was living with my dad. That was the case for, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years or something like that. And then I moved in with my mom because, at a certain point I threw a fit to my dad and I was crying. I was like, I miss my mom because I hadn't seen her in a while. And I was like, I miss my mom. And he was like, all right, cool, get your shit. And so he just dropped me off at her house. And so then now I was living with my mom, and she only had a 2-bedroom. So I would sleep on the couch, and then all my stuff was in like a downstairs coat closet. Like the coat closet was my room, basically. How old were you when you guys got separated?
Well, this is so interesting because
No, it's not. It's not interesting. What is it?
Fascinating.
Right. There you go.
We're on the corner. We're on the intersection of fascination and interesting.
It's near the corner of happy and healthy, but it's just down the block.
Yeah, exactly. There's an alley in between, and you don't want to walk through it alone. I've met very few other people who were separated from a sibling via divorce because even in the 70s and 80s, they knew that wasn't great. And I think now really people don't do it.
To be fair to both of my parents, like you said earlier, my parents were not, they weren't ready to be parents. They were very young as well. They were in high school when they had my sister and me not long after. So I get it. It was a lot.
It's a lot. Now that I have kids of my own, it's funny because I understand their choices more, and I also have a lot less compassion for them because I feel so protective about your kids. And my parents, when my mom was in San Francisco, my dad was still in LA. And so I would travel back and forth via Greyhound bus. And that started when I was 8. So I would be going through the prison belt of Central California on a Greyhound at age 8, reading my Mad magazine. And then now, like, as a mom, I've had 8-year-olds. Like, I know what that is like developmentally. And the thought of like putting that kid on a Greyhound before there was any kind of cell phone, or I was alone 10, 12 hours and there was no way to reach anybody. It was very, very unsafe, and it was really scary and lonely.
I mean, fast forward to just a couple of years ago when it was making the news that some family was letting their 8-year-old walk 1 block to the park, and they were getting in trouble. And here you are taking a Greyhound bus hours.
Please. Gen X heard that story and we were like,
started laughing.
Really? Because I took a Greyhound. I had ponytails. Who's on a Greyhound through Central California is like, you get released from San Quentin and I think they might give you a bus ticket, or at least they did then. So it was really like people visiting prisoners or prisoners. And, you know, the occasional random like old person on their way to see a grandkid. But the Greyhound stations themselves were basically like a place for pimps to find teenage runaways.
Nice. Well done. You should do their advertising campaign.
It writes itself.
It does write itself. In the book, you talk about an award that you won for writing a story about how happy you were when your wicked stepmother died. Tell me the feeling, the moment that they announced your name as the winner. Well,
after getting married and having my kids, it was really one of the most euphoric moments of my life because my stepmother was so evil and mean. She would just say I was stupid and fat and I was dirty. I was never, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say you're huge, by the way. Yeah. I don't know how you fit through that door.
She would say that I was never going to amount to anything. And, you know, she was very abusive and cruel. And when she died, I was really happy. And I wrote about that, and it became a cover story called The Evil Stepmother Dies. And then I won a Los Angeles Press Club award, and the awards.
Where's that award?
Oh my gosh. And that award is, it's like tilted up on a bookcase somewhere.
There's a light shining on it. There's a halo. There's music playing.
It should have its own little place like the Mona Lisa.
So you placed that story in the perfect place in the book, because by the time, obviously, otherwise you'd come off as a monster. But by the time you got to that story, you had already kind of told us some of the things that made her not such a great person or not such a great stepmother. And so like no shit, when I heard that part, because like I said, you read the book to me. I appreciate that, by the way. When I got to that part where you won the award, I did a little fist bump to I was like, yeah, good. I take that. Vindication, bitch.
It was really a feeling of triumph because the Los Angeles Press Club is a really prestigious award, even to be nominated. And then when I won the award, it was just a surreal moment. Here I was being recognized professionally in this huge way. And I just remember like they shine a spotlight on you and you get up and, you know, you go up there to get your award. And I was just thinking like, I'm winning an award for writing about Carol, a person who was so cruel to me and was sure that I was never going to make anything of myself. And it's because of her that I have made something of myself. You know, I think about that still because she was really fuel, and it wasn't clean burning fuel, but it's hard to leave, you know, everything you know in your hometown. And I didn't know anybody in LA, and I showed up there with like a car that didn't have air conditioning and the trunk had to be bungee corded closed, you know, was not a Nepo baby. It's hard to do. It's hard to take a big swing like that. But I didn't have anything to lose. And I had all this motivation because I just thought like the only way to prove her wrong is to just make something of myself. And it's got to be big. It's got to be big time.
I'll show you, lady.
Yeah. So I have gratitude for her on that level. And yet I'm still really happy she's dead. I didn't want her to suffer, but I'm glad she's gone.
I don't know if you can remember your speech, but did it go a little something like this? Thank you, everybody. Haha, fuck you, Carol. Good night. Would it go like that? That's how it would have been for me.
Yeah, I just looked up at the sky and put up my 2 middle fingers and I said, fuck you and thank you.
Nice. Did your dad read that story?
Yeah, I think so.
How did you feel about that?
I think so, but we have never discussed it.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah, like, look, I think he feels bad that he chose to be with somebody who was very cruel to his kids. But, he was a little bit spineless back then, and he was running Delta Battery. He was working 6 days a week. And I think he just wanted somebody around to do his laundry and cook his dinner.
Sweet. Wow. What a touching tribute.
Yeah.
Chapter 7 is where the rubber meets the road, basically. Chapter 7 is pathos on paper. It's the one that got me in the feels for the first time, as the kids say. Do you have a favorite chapter of this book? Because I was waiting for a shoe to drop for 6 chapters. And then all of a sudden, boom, it lands in chapter 7. And I was just like, holy balls, this is where it is. Do you have a favorite chapter?
Well, thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
I have a favorite scene. There's one scene I wrote before I wrote the rest of the book. I had a book proposal. It's a simple log line. This is a book about a father and daughter who turned one season of Little League into a grief group. And my agent said, I think I can sell this, but if you can write a chapter, a sample chapter, I know I can sell it. And he said, I need you to write your Oscar scene. I'm like, what's the Oscar scene? He goes, the scene that if it's a movie, the character in that scene wins an Oscar. And I immediately knew what he was talking about. I'm like, oh, you're Sally Field in Steel Magnolias at the grave scene, like the Oscar scene. I knew what he meant. So I thought about it and I thought about it. And so I went to a hotel for 24 hours with my laptop.
Was it the Fairmont?
The Fairmont. Yes. The Princess. You know it?
No.
So I went there. I knew the scene I wanted to write. It was really hard. I kind of came up with an outline that night, but I still didn't have the scene. What I wanted to write, well, once my dad and I were sitting in our Costco chairs at a Little League game, one of the first games of the season, we're behind the first baseline. My dad rarely talks about my brother. And he said, apropos of nothing, sometimes when I'm riding my bike home, I just scream. I'm like, what do you mean, Dad? Well, I just scream out into the night because I'm not bothering anybody. Nobody can hear me. And I was like, well, like, do you scream like Morgan's name or what do you, and I could tell it was already too much for him. And the game was starting. He didn't want to talk about it. And he said, I just scream. I'm not bothering anybody. And so I just thought about my dad riding his bike home from a Little League game in the dark, from the Ingleside Middle School fields to his trailer park, the Riviera. And I just pictured this old man screaming into the night, screaming my brother's name. And like how this was some part of his grief group. And I wanted to know all about it, but I couldn't ask him. And I knew this was going to be the Oscar scene, but I also couldn't write it. So I borrowed my dad's bike and I rode from the Little League fields to his house. I recreated his ride. And by the time I had gotten there, I had the chapter in my head, stopping every 10 feet, taking notes. This is how it feels. This is how the duck pond smells on my right. This is the, apartment complex on my left. On the bike path, this is where it says yield. This is how my shoulders feel. And this is how it would sound to yell out the name of your dead child on this bike path. I wrote that scene and I'm so proud of it. And I still think it's the best scene in the book.
Wow. That got me chills. That is your Oscar scene. Good job.
Well, let's hope Henry Winkler plays my dad and wins an Oscar screaming into the night.
I did ask you who it was going to be, and I don't think I gave you a chance to answer. I'll reach out to Ron and see if we can make that happen.
Thank you.
One of the funniest things in the book was toward the end, and I don't care what your dad says, Little League Surf and Turf is hilarious. Please explain what that is.
Oh, okay. So at the All-Star game, they had somebody on the PA system announcing all the specials at the snack bar, and the Little League Surf and Turf is the hot dog and the goldfish.
A hot dog and the goldfish, and I could not stop laughing. And then, like, when the announcer said that, your dad was like, oh, brother, or whatever. He was like, come on, that's cheesy. And you were like, no, that's a good joke. And then they said it again, and he was like, no. And you were like, no, it holds up. And I'm like, that is hilarious. That is a good bit.
Yeah, my dad was like, oh, this guy needs new material. I'm like, that's not a bad joke.
That's timeless. That's amazing. Teresa, you wrote this book to help you cope with the losses of both your brother and your mother. Did it work? Did it help you? How are you doing right now with all of that? How are you? I know this has been a few years since the events happened, but you wrote this book to kind of help you. How are you? How did it do?
Well, it definitely helped with my relationship with my dad. We got really close during the season in the book. And then all the seasons since that we've watched my kids play basketball, baseball, and football.
So it's not just baseball. He goes to everything.
Everything.
Did you ever think that he would be that guy?
I think being a grandfather is a do-over. And like a lot of grandparents, he's much better at that than he was at being a parent. And that's why I love baseball as an analogy or as a backdrop for this book, because there's so many do-overs in baseball. You get the bottom and the top of the inning. You get a fresh at bat. You get 3 new swings, you get 3 new outs. And of course, it's a sport that starts again every spring. So it's kind of like nature, like the flowers are blooming and the animals are coming out of hibernation, and baseball is reborn again every year. So I love that. And I think my dad has reinvented himself as a great grandpa and is a great dad to me now. We're really, really close. If I've got a problem, an emotional problem, that's who I call my dad.
But what happens if you leave your car door open and the battery goes out? Who do you call then?
My dad's been fixing my cars since I was 16. Change the battery, change the oil. Also, he hasn't worked in the shop in a long time. And I recently heard this joke like, oh, I'm a YouTube certified mechanic. My dad fixes everything based on YouTube, like a refrigerator, a hinge on a door. That's his love language. He fixes all kind of shit around my house and all our cars, and he learns how to do it on YouTube.
Love it. Teresa, where can people find you on social media?
I'm just Teresa Strasser, TeresaStrasser. And the book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Audible, anywhere you find books.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, just TeresaStrasser.com.
Now, can people buy the book from your website?
No. Should I be doing that? I told you, I'm not a good business lady.
You should be doing that, and here's why. You sent me this beautiful, beautiful book, which I appreciate. It's so gorgeous. But you know what's not in here? Your signature.
Should I have signed it? I felt like I didn't know if I wanted to defile your copy. What if you want to resell it?
Sell it, please. You should sign everyone that you give out, but also you should make them available on your website with a signature. Because look, this book is going to help a lot of people. And much like Bald Brian's book, Brian Bishop, called Shrinkage, this book is going to help people, and then they're going to pass it on, or they're going to buy it for somebody else. And so I think it would be a really great addition to your website if you were able to sell a personalized book. Like if I wanted to give this book to, I don't know, my friend Bob, then I would buy it from you and you would sign it in there. Hey, Bob, Steve thinks you'll like this book, or whatever. Steve thinks you're a douchebag of a dad. You should go to a game. Whatever it is. I don't know. What do you got to lose? Call somebody up and have them add that to your website, since I know you can't do it.
Thank you. If you know how to do this sort of thing, slide into my DMs and help me, because listen, Gen X is not good. I'm not a digital native. I'm not good at figuring stuff like that out, but I also just assume nobody's going to want that. But yeah, Mike, you're right. What do I have to lose?
You're incorrect. Well, oh yeah, what do you have to lose? Once it's there, it's just going to sit there as a tab. And when it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But at least it's an option. And people really, really do love to have a signed book. I mean, how many book signings have you done?
Well, not very many. I think I've done like 3. I'm going to be at the Tucson Book Festival. I did one when the book came out, on the day it came out. And yeah, they sold out of books. So yeah, maybe people do like a signed book.
So when they sold out of books, did they stand in line just so that they could show you the book, or did they want you to do something with a pen?
No, they definitely wanted me. So I should, you know what? I'll send you a book plate. It's like a little sticker.
Oh, I know what it is. I heard about it from Adam Carolla when he was signing book plates for his first book.
Yep.
And I have passed that book plate idea on to several writers who have implemented that as well. So yeah, send me a book plate.
I will.
I love it.
You know what I'm going to put on the address, though? I'm going to just put Fascination Street and hope that the postman finds you.
Yes, absolutely. Teresa, before I let you go, is there anything we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you about that you specifically wanted to talk about today? Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the kind words about the book. Thank you for buying the audio book. There's nothing I won't do for this book. I really love it. I really believe in it. And I just appreciate you helping more people find it.
It is 100% my pleasure. I'm not kidding. I love this book so much. It was touching. It was helpful to understand what maybe somebody else would be going through. And it brought back a lot of memories and feelings about me and my sister being separated and what that was like. And, you know, struggling with the two different households and all the step parents and everything that comes along with all of that. Now, we didn't have baseball or any sports or anything like that to help us get over it. My sister and I just kind of had each other. And, you know, moving into, you know, these adult years, I can't imagine what it would be like if I didn't have my sister to lean on. So I'm so sorry that you don't have Muggs. That's what y'all called him, right? Muggsy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that you guys don't have him. But we're not going to do that. Oh, I do want to give a quick shout out to the person who has been on my show the most, besides me. 5-time previous guest of the show, Vinnie Tortorich. Thank you, my brother, for making this happen. This was everything that I had hoped it would be. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate your time, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy day and your hectic watching the Purple Pinstripes win championship schedule to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your week.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Opening music is the song FSP Theme, written, performed, and provided by Ambush Vin. Closing music is from the song Say My Name off the 2021 album Underdog Anthems, used with permission from Jax Hollow. If you like the show, tell a friend. Subscribe and rate and review the show on iTunes and wherever else you download podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the episodes are available there as well. Check me out on Vero at Fascination Street Pod and TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And again, thanks for listening.